This is Fieldsports Channel News. Thousands of people have complained to a water company over its plans to ban grouse shooting on its land. At least 30 shoots could lose after United Utilities announced that all shoot leases on its land will be terminated when they come up for renewal. The water company supplies water across the northwest of England. The Countryside Alliance has set up an e-lobby to show the level of concern at the move. More than 5,000 people have already signed. Link below. The Alliance says the announcement seems designed to deflect from the company's appalling environmental record, polluting rivers. It says United Utilities was responsible for more than 69,000 sewage overflows in 2022 alone.
We're going to continue to campaign to point out the fact that they are polluters and that they're not going to be able to get away with throwing shooting under the bus, because by doing that, they're not only risking the livelihoods of thousands of people, but they're also putting conservation and biodiversity in our countryside at risk.
As reported in Fieldsports News last week, James Crowther, who runs the Upwood Estate in Lancashire, was out shooting pigeons with friends when armed officers with riot gear swooped in and seized their guns. Even though the pigeon shooters showed their certificates and the farmer confirmed he had asked for crop protection, the officers took the guns. BASC's North Director Duncan Thomas confirms the Manchester force has now returned the guns and is launching an internal review. He says the shooters are making a formal complaint. He says BASC has offered officers training that's already delivered to other forces.
Unfortunately, the police's reaction was full on ballistic shields, guns, shouting, screaming, telling them to get on the ground and put their guns on the floor and stuff. Completely disproportional. We hear today that the guns have been returned and the matter has all been resolved, but it's almost certain that the people involved will want to lodge a formal complaint against GMP. Hopefully there'll be some learning out of it. We will of course offer GMP some training in shooting sports, familiarisation and stuff.
DEFRA has handed this year's bluefin tuna commercial fishery to 10 boats in England. The UK has 65 tonnes of bluefin tuna quota, an increase on the quota in 2021 and 2022, and it can offer 39 tonnes of this quota for the commercial fishery. Catch and release sport fishing boats, which are part of the government's chart scheme for bluefin tuna fishing, will have the balance of the quota. Skipper Chris Gill is one of the 10 chosen. He is drawing up a code of practice for how the fish will be handled. Stay vigilant over the threat of bird flu. That's the message to shoots from Aim to Sustain, which represents a variety of field sports groups, including BASC and the Countryside Alliance. The group says that although the disease is less prevalent in 2023 than it was in 2022, the infection in wild birds still poses a threat to game birds. Meanwhile, the RSPB is making much of bird flu, warning that the spread among seabird populations is a crisis that could become a catastrophe. It claims hundreds of dead birds suspected to have been affected with avian flu have been washed up on beaches across the UK, including Blackpool, Aberdeenshire, the Isle of Man and along the South Pembrokeshire coast.
We did actually have a very brief period a couple of weeks ago when there were no disease control zones in place. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long. We are, however, now starting to see the worrying repeat of last year's phenomenon of the disease overwintering through the summer in our coastal seabird colonies. And although there are some subtle differences with what we saw last year, the overall outcome of this is likely to be a similar situation to what we saw with the threat to release game birds in the late summer and early autumn. And the advice would be for everybody to bear this in mind if they're releasing game birds and take any steps they're able to protect their birds from infection from wild birds.
Hunters and shooters apparently planted a bomb outside Chris Packham's house in 2021. The Daily Mirror reports that a vehicle set alight outside the gates of the BBC TV presenter's house in the New Forest was a car bomb. The same newspaper reports that Packham blames the burning car on the field sports community. Hampshire Police does not confirm that version of events. In 2022, it released images of a man they would like to speak to and a car. Locals say that burning out stolen cars is common in the area, with a truck set alight on the same night less than a mile away from Packham's land. Packham is currently suing Fieldsports Channel for defamation. He says he's also turned the burnt-out gates into a coffee table. BASC says the response to the firearms consultation is overwhelming. It says the Home Office has already had around 60,000 responses. BASC welcomes the government's rejection of putting shotguns on firearms certificates, but says it's vital that shooters continue to make their views known on more than a dozen other suggestions, including giving police more powers to search and seize guns from home.
A big thank you to all the people who've already completed it, but we've had something like 60,000 responses. So a bigger response than we had to the game bird release in Wales, even though we haven't been running, the same sort of campaign. So it's really good. Shooters, I think, have clearly picked up on the fact that this is important, and they need to make their views heard, which is, what we're saying to them.
The Countryside Alliance in Scotland is challenging the Scottish Government over its hunting with dogs bill. The Scottish Parliament passed the bill after 7 years of debate. The new legislation replaces the 2002 Scottish ban on hunting with hounds, which antis now admit they got wrong. The Countryside Alliance says the new law is driven by a continuing political obsession with fox hunting. The law allows unlimited numbers of dogs in beating lines as long as no more than 2 dogs come together at any time, as well as creating confusion about rough shooting. It licenses packs of hounds and bans trail hunting. Nature Scott has published guidance for the bill. Jake Swindles of the Countryside Alliance says the guidance has a number of issues of concern which he'll be taking up with Nature Scott.
It's really important to make sure that Nature Scott are putting together robust and practical and workable solutions where the guidance is concerned. We're dealing with people's livelihoods, we're dealing with real serious conservation efforts that people have put a lot of time and money into over the years, and it's key that we can both protect our livestock and recover red-listed species in Scotland.
The owner of the controversial Queenag estate in the Scottish Highlands is raising money for deer management. The John Muir Trust has raised more than £9,000 with an appeal for cash to fund a PR campaign to persuade Scotland it should be allowed to kill more deer. It says the money will be used to spread the word about sustainable deer management. This includes funding a community stalking feasibility study, producing a film to spotlight the issue and pay for campaign staff to lobby the Scottish Government. Queenag Estate has been at the centre of a media storm over whether John Muir Trust should kill so many deer that neighbouring estates can't offer deer stalking. The Prince and Princess of Wales have voiced their support for African rangers who've died in the fight against poaching. With the bulk of South African wildlife on hunting estates, these are the 71 wildlife rangers from the Game Rangers Association who have died in the last year. The Prince and Princess tweeted the list to mark World Ranger Day. And finally, a zoo in China has had to release a statement to convince people that their sun bear is a real bear. A visitor to Huangzhou Zoo became convinced that the bear is a human with a costume and released a video that many people believed. In a statement, the zoo said, "If you get someone to wear such thick fur in this summer heat, they won't last more than a few minutes." Thanks to Ben O'Rourke for the story. You are now up to date with Fieldsports Channel News. Stalking the stories, fishing for facts.